Dear friends, welcome to another episode in the fantastic military world. In this video, we will talk about how exactly the United States military aid packages to Ukraine work. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe now and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. In March 1941, anyone analyzing the situation in Europe in a cold and objective way would inevitably conclude that Germany would win the war. At that time, the Germans had already defeated Poland in less than a month, and the powerful France had been subdued in just a month and a half. With Belgium, the Netherlands, and Norway firmly conquered and occupied, practically all of Europe was in German hands or under the control of German allies. The United Kingdom, led by Prime Minister Winston Churchill, was completely isolated since the French surrender in June of the previous year. To make matters worse, Stalin's Soviet Union had a broad strategic pact with Germany, which even included the supply of important raw materials for the German war effort. On the other side of the Atlantic, the United States under President Roosevelt remained out of the war, with a strong isolationist sentiment deeply permeating American society, which feared being dragged into what it called another European war. With Europe defeated and occupied, and the United Kingdom alone and surrounded by the dreaded Germans, any analyst at that time could predict a German victory in the war. However, even without being able to actively enter the conflict to help its British ally, on March 11, 1941, in a terribly dark and serious moment for Europe, the United States signed the Lend-Lease Act, a law that allowed it to provide supplies to its allies without thereby breaking its statute of neutrality in the conflict. At that time, the only ally of the United States in combat was the United Kingdom, so the first aids were sent exclusively to the British. However, in June 1941, Germany broke the pact it had signed with the Soviet Union in August 1939, invading the country with a force of nearly 4 million soldiers. With Stalin immediately becoming an ally, he also began receiving resources and equipment from the United States under the Lend-Lease law. Through this law, the United States sent its allies the equivalent of nearly $1 trillion in today's values in supplies and equipment, corresponding to more than 500,000 jeeps, 12,000 armored vehicles, nearly 15,000 aircraft, including fighters, transport planes, and bombers, and close to 3 million tons of canned food. According to the details of the law, everything that was delivered was to be returned at the end of the conflict, but there was a special clause that stated that if the equipment was damaged or destroyed, only a fraction of its nominal value had to be returned, usually 1% of the value or even less. Other goods like food, fuel, financial aid, and raw materials were supplied in the form of loans, with the benefited countries able to pay their debts over up to 60 years. Indeed, the last payment of the Lend-Lease made by the United Kingdom to the United States occurred in 2005, 60 years after the end of the war. Other countries besides the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union also benefited from this law, such as Brazil, China, and countries that were in the midst of the war storm, like the Netherlands, Belgium, Greece, and the Netherlands. The Lend-Lease law was a very ingenious political move by the United States, allowing its powerful industry to directly support its allies without thereby getting directly involved in the war. 81 years later, on May 9, 2022, President Joe Biden signed another Lend-Lease law, this time aimed at supporting Ukraine, brutally invaded by Vladimir Putin's Russia. This law is very similar to the one signed in 1941, giving President Biden extended powers to make agreements with the Ukrainian government involving the loan or rental of defense items, such as anti-tank missiles, multiple rocket launchers like HIMARS, and important and authentically vital air defenses, like the Patriot. Like the 1941 law, the 2022 law also provides for the return of items after the end of the war, or, in case of damage or destruction, the payment of at least a part of the corresponding value. But despite the scope of the law, President Biden still needs to obtain from the Senate and Congress the funds necessary for the acquisition or production of the items sent to Ukraine until January 2023. As both Congress and the Senate were controlled by the Democrats, President Biden's party, the billion-dollar aid packages were released quickly and peacefully. However, from January 7th, with Congress becoming majority Republican, negotiations became much more protracted, with Congress completely stopping the approval of new military aids for Ukraine from October, when Mike Johnson was elected as the new speaker. Since then, the United States has not sent any more significant military aid packages to Ukraine. even though President Biden has extensive powers to send everything Ukraine needs to defend itself. With the last package of $61 billion scheduled to be voted on in Congress this Friday, April 19th. If approved, Ukraine will finally have what it needs to at least stabilize the combat front and block multiple Russian advances at various points along the front line. But how is this money actually spent? The United States simply signs a blank check of billions of dollars and hands it to President Zelensky. The military aid sent by the United States to Ukraine are in the form of weapons and equipment that are already in the stocks of the U.S. armed forces. Whenever the United States sends, for example, a howitzer to Ukraine, that howitzer was taken from one of the numerous depots of surplus items, military material that was produced in the past but is now no longer needed. However, as this item needs to be replenished in the stock, what President Biden does with the money from the billion-dollar packages released for Ukraine is to order the production of a new howitzer to occupy the space of the one that was sent to the Ukrainians. This means that when the United States talks about military aids of $40, $50, or $60 billion, what they are saying in practice is that they will send all those billions of dollars in weapons that are stocked in warehouses of surplus material, with all those billions being delivered to the American defense industrial base, with Ukraine receiving what it effectively needs to defend itself from Russian aggression, weapons and ammunition. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe and activate the notification bell to not miss any news, criticisms, ideas, or suggestions. You can leave them in the comments.